Omar Abdullah, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Now, I want to ask you, the governor came out with a detailed statement yesterday where he tried to defend what exactly was going on in the valley. He said the security that was brought in, the very large number of troops, is just because of the elections, and that the petrol shortage is only because of a highway blockage and so on. Do you buy this explanation?
Well, I mean, it's a little difficult to buy because, I mean, the wording of the orders was worrisome. I mean, it talked about an emerging situation, about law and order disturbances. I mean, the fact that these troops had to be rushed in by air, 100 companies. I mean, the election dates haven't been announced yet. In fact, the Election Commission hasn't even visited Jammu and Kashmir yet. They're expected next week sometime. So even if this was a build-up in anticipation of the elections, those elections are, I mean, if they're held hopefully on time, they're to be held in April, May and June. So why suddenly having to fly them in overnight doesn't make sense. But chaliye, we'll give the benefit of the doubt to the governor and his administration. It's just that this, as I said, the tension, the rumors, all the worry. It wasn't an overnight development. It had been simmering. The government should have stepped in earlier and corrected the perception that people had.
So that in that sense then, do you blame people for panicking?
I don't blame them. I mean, I had sleepless nights. I was worried about what was going to happen because, as I said, nobody was talking to us. Nobody in a position of authority was able to tell us exactly what was going on. I mean, I'm just glad that Dr. Saab spoke to the Home Minister, and from then on there was a flurry of activity and things were calmed down. But I mean, it shouldn't have taken that conversation. This is the problem when you have an administration that has very little contact with people. I mean, this is the difference between an elected government and a nominated government. And an elected government would have never allowed the situation to reach this point. An elected government would have had its finger on the pulse of people. It would have reached out and taken corrective measures much earlier. But that's our misfortune.
Right. So when you said Dr. Saab, you meant, of course, Dr. Farooq Abdullah. But, you know, prior to this, of course, there were those wave of detentions of separatist leaders, Islamist leaders as well, and also the stripping of security cover of leaders from across the political spectrum. Do you think that this was a necessary measure at this point?
Well, let's first talk about the mainstream political leaders who have had their security stripped. I think that was untimely and an unwise decision. Because on the one hand, you have the Election Commission talking about elections. You have the governor saying that this additional security forces are being brought in to prepare for elections. And on the other hand, the people that are going to be part of this electoral process, either in the form of candidates or campaigners or backroom operatives, are having their security stripped and their mobility taken away from them. So, I mean, how are you helping the election process by stopping mainstream political operatives from doing their work? I mean, take for example somebody like Shah Faisal. How is it that while he was a government officer, his threat perception required him to have security, yet the moment he leaves government service and becomes a mainstream political operative, then suddenly his threat vanishes altogether and he requires no security at all? Now, this doesn't make sense to me. As for the separatist leaders, As for the separatists, look, successive governments have felt for one reason or another the need to protect these people. And this is not a recent phenomenon. Whether it has been governments led by the BJP or governments led by the Congress, for reasons of intelligence, for reasons best known to those governments, a decision was taken to protect these individuals. And this protection withstood all sorts of other attacks. It withstood the Parliament attack, it withstood the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, it withstood the 2016 Uri strike and every other militant attack in between.
So you think that that it's justified that now it should be taken away, the security cover of these separatists? That it was long overdue?
I'm talking about the separatists. The previous governments felt that there was a reason to protect them. This government feels otherwise. So be it. They're obviously privy to more information than I'm privy to. I was Chief Minister of the state for 6 years. It's no secret that during my government this protection was provided on the advice and inputs of the central government. Today the central government feels otherwise. Let's not forget that these separatist leaders are also not immune to threat. In the past, separatist leaders that have been willing to engage Government of India in a dialogue have been targeted. No less a person than Mirwais Maulana Farooq Sahab in the early 90s, and then Abdul Ghani Lone Sahab in 2002. They have been assassinated because of their willingness to engage Government of India in talks. This government has decided not to accord security to the separatists. That was their decision.
Now, finally, I just want to ask you, Omar, that you have been saying that the elections should go ahead on schedule despite the fact that the Pulwama attack has taken place, the situation is tense. Still, you're saying that this is a test of the Modi government.
If you want those forces to win, by all means, let the elections be postponed. But again, I'm making this point. In 2014, you had Parliament and Assembly elections on time. Subsequent to that, you've had 5 years of the Modi government. Has the Prime Minister Modi government mishandled Kashmir to such an extent that for the first time since 95-96, you won't be able to have elections on time? This is a question only Prime Minister Modi and his government can answer.